Hello. So this is Liam from Game Production Academy, and I was asked after people saw the work estimation YouTube video, I was asked by some people, tell us more about these roadmaps that you're talking about. They look interesting. So I'm going to do a really deep dive in some areas, shallow dive in others. Road mapping is a huge part of game production. As far as I'm concerned, for most producers, the understanding you have a road mapping and how to turn a roadmap into a plan makes or breaks you as a useful producer. So I know that a lot of producers have soft skills. I'm really after teaching you, if I can, hard skills. And the hard skills are the scientific skills, right? They're the skills which have been proven across multiple industries. They're the skills that you pick up, for example, if you are a product manager looking on, say, mobile apps or looking at software industry generally. They are the kind of skills that you, say, pick up if you are into strategy and you like to look at business implications. They're also the kind of skills that project managers look at. So multiple projects become programs of work, and program managers look after multiple streams of projects. And how do you map all those dependencies together, etc. So I think that you need to know these things if you're a producer. You can't just rely on people liking you and your ability to bring a team together and keep a team together. Those things are very, very important. I assume you have them, right? I assume that in a producer. But where I see a lot of gaps are in the hard knowledge, the scientific knowledge. And again, as always, I don't profess to know more than anyone else, but at least I know some stuff, and at least I'm prepared to share it with you. And if you find it useful, great. I'm just here to try and help with a bit of mentoring, okay? If this stuff's useful to you, I really appreciate it. I appreciate being able to give something useful. If it's not useful to you, or if you think it's wrong, tell me, right? Just let's get a conversation going. And also, if you're looking at this stuff and you're going, hey, I've got some great examples that would really enrich this, come and get in contact. Let me chat to you. Let me record it. Share assets, right? Let's get a community going here, as well as the Discord community. Let's get a community of learning going. I've got the game-production.com website for this as well, so I can store stuff there for you. But this is all about those hard skills. And I use hard skills as a bit of a pun versus soft skills, but also because they are hard. You know, I've spent my life having to learn some really hard things and make a lot of mistakes. And I don't see why you should have to do the same. Make the mistakes, that is. Or at least make as many. I might as well share with you some of the stuff that I've learned right over the years. Not just inside the games industry, but elsewhere. Alright, so all that said, let's look at roadmaps. Now, this little chat is going to be about road mapping. I suppose the deep dives are going to be looking at why roadmap at all, and what's the point, and how do you get a plan out of it. But there's going to have to be multiple chats here, right? Because this is such a big topic. I'm going to give you examples though, which I know are incredibly useful. So I'm going to give you examples of what these things might look like. I do want to preface this though with a disclaimer that I've got up here. Alright, most of what I'm going to talk about are applicable to PC, console and larger games. And that's just because I've chosen to start at the most complicated, biggest, largest scale that I know about the most. Now, mobile games require different emphasis, okay? It's more about monetization. It's more about measuring success in the form of KPIs, like with lag and lead metrics. It's more about building in things like habit forming and addiction type design principles, frankly. It's more about reaching your market rapidly. It's more about live ops support costs. You look at the cost of keeping a mobile game going. It's surprisingly complicated, and a lot goes into it, and it affects the kind of road mapping that you see, and it affects the kind of planning, because you're tending to reach live a lot faster overall. Whereas if you're making quite an ambitious game, it could take a couple of years, right? And that affects the vision, it affects the type of investment and business decisions, it affects metrics when you think deadlines are that are particularly important to you. These things are different. And also like the whole live ops model. Now, I don't want to go into all of that now. What I want to do though is just remind you that when we go through this, I'm pretty much talking about experience of making AA, AAA game type affairs, because those are the kind of examples that you're going to see here. So what the hell is a roadmap? A roadmap is a map, right, of the road ahead. It's a map. Now, maps used to have things like "Here be dragons," and probably should still, because a map is just a map, okay? It's just a road ahead. It's a journey. It's like saying, if you were to come on the journey, we think that currently it looks a bit like this. That is of necessity a guess. It's of necessity in the games industry a guess, because in the games industry you're making games, and games involve, on the whole, exploring new ground. It might not. It might be that you're just putting out 30 more levels, in which case your roadmap is going to look a lot different than these roadmaps, okay? But again, I'm presuming that what we're looking at here is roadmaps for new games. Roadmaps which require a vision, which require GDD to an extent, which require breaking down into plans, etc. You may be at a certain level and a certain phase in which some of this isn't applicable to you, but I can guarantee you that this is the sort of knowledge which can sit in the back of your brain and then come to the forefront when you need it. Because you can't make a plan without a roadmap. It's impossible. Let me rephrase. You can make a plan without a roadmap, but it will be a very crappy plan, because it's got no foundation. It's got no basis in reality, okay? And when I talk about reality, I talk about business reality. Now let's dive in a little bit, rather than me waffle on. A good old Miro board, as usual from me. I love Miro, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it's so easy to use. I used to use mind mapping software, completely replaced that with Miro. I used to do presentations through Zoom and share screen on lots of different systems, completely replaced that with Miro. Miro's great. Miro you can talk about, you can change as you go, you can shove in links and they appear as little pages, you can do all sorts, you can present from Miro, you can collaborate from Miro, you can do voting, you can do lots of agile ceremonies from Miro. And since we are more and more remote as teams, it's great, right? I can share these Miro boards with you. As long as you've got a Miro account, you can import them. Brilliant. Why is that? Why am I talking about that now? Because guess what? Road mapping and planning is all about communication and collaboration. Okay? Why have a roadmap in the first place? Why have a plan? It's so that you can communicate. Now, you might be communicating that to teams of developers and artists, etc. You might be communicating it to investors. You might be communicating it to your bosses in the studios. Whoever you're communicating it to, these are all simply communication tools. Miro's a communication tool. A roadmap is a communication tool. A GDD is a communication tool. Everything is just communication. And of course, with producers, special soft skill for producers, communication. You love communicating and you're good at it, okay? And it makes you naturally able to add value to this whole process. So let's start over here. When you're looking at developing a game, you're looking at some form of investment, right? And that might not be something you truly appreciate, but you should think about it. Because investment's very important. Without investment, and this could be a portion of a studio's funding that they're giving you so that you can build a certain size team with certain size resource, etc. It could be investment that's coming from a billionaire who's very interested in your particular game. It could be investment that's coming from multiple sources and they all add up. Whatever it is though, without investment, you've got no game because you've got nobody to work on a game. All you've got is an idea. But you start with an idea, and that idea is your vision. And the vision can take many different forms. The vision can take a form of simply an elevator pitch, or it can take the form of a very large fleshed out document in which you describe all these incredible things that's going to be put in the game. But a vision is, by definition, visionary. It is about the future. It changes. It is a vision that needs to be fulfilled, but in order to execute upon that vision, you need to try it out. You need to say, well, is it going to work? Is this a good vision? Am I going to end up changing bits of this vision? Yes. Yes, you are. Because a vision comes in at such a high level that in the necessity of working through it and testing it out and trying things, you break it down in such a way that elements of that vision are bound to change. And again, that's game development. You're hiring in people who are very creative, who have incredible imaginations and incredible technical skills, and can put all of that together in extremely exciting ways. And that will provide you with a living, breathing vision that needs to change. Now, this vision needs investment. Otherwise, it's just a good idea and nothing ever happens from it. When you introduce money, people in the games industry can, at a certain level, go, oh, don't know about that. But you're a producer, so you need to know about money. Money keeps you in a job. Money is something which affects the monetization of your game. Money is something where a lot of decisions get made which aren't particularly popular. That's life. Money, investment, costs, etc., dollars, that stuff, or pounds, if you don't mind, that stuff's important, right? And we'll come back to why. But your vision will produce a helicopter view of developing your game. Because the vision might be, for example, you know what, it's a clone of Mario Kart, right? But instead of Mario Kart, it's, I don't know, dinosaurs with wheels, and they're going to club each other. You're going to have people clubbing each other in these dinosaurs, and but it's a clone of another game, and yeah, it's going to be like this rough stuff. And at a very high level, your helicopter view, just that little stupid example that I gave off the top of my head, is enough to give some, say, design engineering directors or leads enough there to go, oh, okay, we're probably going to have to, all right, so if it's going to be like this game, then we'll probably have to use, say, Unreal Engine, and we're probably going to have to use this, and it'll be multiplayer. So you've given enough there, right? In a vision, you've given enough there for people to go, oh, okay, I've got enough here to develop my idea of what might be required. And when you know what might be required, then you've got a helicopter view. And you can go from there to produce a more detailed version and keep applying that detailed version back to the vision. So you can talk to the vision holder or the vision holders, and you can say, hey, is this the kind of thing that you're thinking about? Right, well, you should be aware that if you want to do that, we're going to need this, and this. And that leads to capacity planning, right? Because it leads to you saying, we're going to need this engine, or we're going to need this number of people. We're going to need these specialists. We're going to need X, Y, Z. And it leads to an org chart, because you build a team around your vision, but the vision needs to be detailed enough by clever people and tested out enough through conversation and communication. It needs to be tested out enough that you can say, this is kind of what we're going to need in terms of people and systems and frameworks, and here's what we've got so far, here's where we've got gaps. Guess what? That leads you to a recruitment plan. Now, I did this a year ago, right, with a new company that was forming. I got in there and we put together a really high level view, which I'll show you, and we did this. We did the gap analysis, if you will. We looked at what is it we need to fulfill our plan. What have we got now? What do we need to get? And that what is in terms of people and in terms of systems and in terms of everything else, right? Tools, etc. And it becomes a recruitment plan. And you'll find that if you want to be successful at saying, I need a new role hired, you should think about this. You should think about, well, how does it fit into the overall recruitment plan, right? How does it fit into delivering on that vision? So this little stream here gives you job descriptions that need to be produced. It gives you possibly a website to advertise, recruiter packs for giving people sales pitches to recruiters for them to use, etc. Okay. It also produces a product roadmap. Now, a product roadmap we're going to go into in detail, but basically the product roadmap is a business level roadmap to a degree, because it includes things like milestones and deliverables. And milestones, in other words, you've reached this milestone, I'm expecting to see this by then. Those kind of things only really need to be set in stone if you have got people relying upon you to deliver on a thing for a good reason. So it could be that it's tied to, say, conferences. One that always used to be joked about was E3. Now, E3 is becoming less of a thing at the moment, but E3 used to be huge, right? And you would have to tie in deliverables to E3. Now, it could be that you're tying in just a trailer, just a movie, right? And you might fake that movie or you might not. But basically, that could be a milestone for you. We need to have a certain thing ready to demo at E3. Could be a demo. But there's other milestones, right? If you've got investors, say you work for Microsoft and they're paying you, they might require something every month or every quarter. They might require an actual bill delivered to them, in which case those are proper milestones, and whether you like it or not, they are real and you need to deliver against them. Your product roadmap visualizes that. It says those are the kind of things that are milestones, but there's also streams of creation and delivery coming together, right? So it's like across different levels from different disciplines or different areas, how that comes together and what it looks like could be, for example, a proof of concept deadline date that you've got, or a vertical slice, or a rolling release and a soft launch or whatever. These are the kind of things where it might be tied into how much money you got left. What does your they call it many different things. Let's just say how much money you got left, right? Just call it that. But how much of the investment is left? And even if you're working for a studio, they might say, well, it's supposed to take 2.5 years. That's what we've budgeted. You've got 2.5 years. What can you do in 2.5 years? So you've actually got milestones and you've got deliverables. That's where your product roadmap can visualize that. And it's a communication tool, right? Everything's a communication tool. So the people up there, or in your case, it could be with you, down there, whatever, depends upon your level of production. This is something where, as a producer, it influences everything else, like I've put here, right? Because if you've got a product roadmap, it can be negotiated against, it can be viewed and it can be talked about, and you can say the product roadmap needs to change. Okay, we're going to need more money, or we're going to be late. Here's the impact. Here's what that's going to look like when it comes to, say, the budget, or when it comes to the knock-on effects for milestones. And that negotiation is important and is always possible. Okay, a negotiation is always possible. Now, you might have to negotiate pretty hard, or somebody on your behalf, or this could all be happening at a certain level in the clouds above you, for all I know, right? But these negotiations happen a lot. And that's because every one of these artifacts, these outputs that you produce, these roadmaps, they're simply communication tools. And I can't drill that into your head enough. They're just for communication, right? And let's look at some examples very briefly, and I'll do this in more detail. But for example, here's a vision document, right? And I say it's a vision document. It's a snapshot of a vision that was produced in Miro. What it was was a series of discussions that led from an initial vision into something that could be visualized for the team. And it was split into some pillars, right? Combat pillar, battle royale, level, and game systems. And then there were some inspirations in there and why they were inspirations, right? Screenshots from other games and why they were inspirations. And inspirations that are like the game's not like this. And some text descriptions here of like what the game should really focus on in terms of its pillars. That vision was produced over months and was honed and questioned and tried out. And the vision feeds decision making, because the vision says it's like this, not like this. Let's try that, not that. And that vision is produced for the team. Okay, you should have your vision, and you should say, yeah, well, so the game design documentation, it's very light, it's very agile, it's very fluid, but it's based around the vision. So we need, some documentation to talk about the combat, and we need some documentation to talk about some of these game systems. Or we just need to try stuff out and document it as we go. But the fact is, it's driven by the vision. The vision has this this scoping impact. It says to you, the game is this. It's not everything else, it's this. And it's tied into your product roadmap because the vision is visionary. It's not business, it's visionary. I mean, it might have some business stuff in there about getting rich, right, and producing some money. But basically, usually, it's more about this is why this game's going to be amazingly good fun and why millions of players are going to want to play it, okay? Product roadmap looks more like something like here. Now, I'm not going to zoom in too much because this is taken from another game, and I've ripped out some of the detail here. But basically, if you look at time moving from left to right, and you look at some of the game phases like concept and pre-production, production, live game services, etc. And again, I've ripped out some of the detail. But you can look at streams such as business activity, marketing, social space, game stream, studio stream. This is what was in our case, right? And you can look at some of the detail in there of what needs to be done. So you can say over down here, right, in the game stream, early game, develop alpha, beta, release, prove out the level layouts, blah, blah, blah. That sort of product roadmap might be one that's useful to you, but it might not be. It might be you need to do something at a completely different level depending upon the game. And that's something you should know here, is that product roadmaps are business focused on the whole, or can be business focused on the whole, but they can also go down to the level of, okay, but what is it you need to deploy? What is it you need to release? What's the outputs? What does it look like as time goes by, right? What are the outputs here? Now, there's another type of product roadmap, like you can see if you surf the good old internet, then you'll see things like this, where it's more about swimming lanes of category, right? And like there's one there, help desk infrastructure, mobile, and it's by quarters. And this is quite popular to have these like lozenges by quarters. And it used to be that was all in an Excel spreadsheet. And then we had product development software come along and apps. So you've got loads of stuff now like aha.io and, well, just do a search. But they can be different things depending upon your game, your company, what you require, etc. But you shouldn't lose sight that somewhere there is a vision and a product roadmap which are the meeting of great creative ideas and business, okay? And business isn't a dirty word. Business, I'm using business here to say it's about things that need to be deployed, things that need to be ready, okay? Now, if things need to be ready as a producer, you need to find out, what do you mean by ready? Well, what is it exactly that needs to be ready? You've said proof of concept needs to be ready by that date. Why by that date? What's so great about that date? And what is a proof of concept? Do I have the definitions anywhere? What are the success criteria? Have we all agreed on the proof of concept? Let me see it. What is the documentation? Are we all working towards that? Which of these things are at risk, etc.? So even by a simple milestone in a roadmap, you can see that it prospers the whole team because it forces conversation, okay? back to the helicopter view, we've done the capacity planning bit, right? But you can produce more detailed versions. So this is really where the work is for most of you, okay? It's how do we take something that is is high level, how do we bring it down to a mid-level? How do we turn that into technical and development roadmaps? Now, I'm going to show you a really big example of a technical and development roadmap shortly, right? But tech and dev roadmaps, basically, they take something like your high-level view and they translate it into how all the different teams are going to work together and where those dependencies are, etc., right? As you get more and more detailed. But initially, it's a conversation. It's the partnership between the different disciplines, okay? Design, art, engineering, maybe product management if you've got such a thing. And it becomes mostly design-led at the beginning because it's really the design team, particularly the design leads, who are experienced enough to be able to tell the story of the vision, right? And to translate that into what it means at a more elemental level. So, for example, the design lead might say, oh, okay, we need multiplayer, but it's not just any multiplayer, it's going to be this kind of multiplayer. And then the engineering conversation starts between design and engineering, let's say, where they go, okay, yeah, in that case, are you going to want this, or do you think it's going to be more like that? Oh, actually, we're not quite sure. That's not in the vision. Let's go and have a conversation. This is where production really comes in handy because you can help with those conversations. You can be the person who's keeping the notes. You can be the person who's driving the conversation. You can be the person who's booking the meetings and making sure the leads show up. This is critical stuff, right? This isn't a nice to have. It's not just, I don't know, it's not just, you're not like a PA. This is critical. These partnerships need to be driven by somebody because everybody's busy. So this ability to bring people together and have the conversations is so important. And these conversations can go on for weeks and months. And in fact, for, frankly, the life of the game in some cases. Because these roadmaps are very, very big and complicated if you have a big, complicated game. Anything that's involving AA, AAA these days tends to be very large. And if you're not just getting off the shelf stuff, or even if you are, there's going to be things like co-dev partnerships, outsourcing, insourcing, let's say multiplayer, security, blah, 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 right? This massive undertaking. And you might be able to rely on some of the internal teams around you if you're in a big studio. You might not. You might have to do it all yourself. But you need to be able to consider all of these things and ask those questions. And that's why producers are so important, that you understand the hard skills, not just the soft skills, right? You need that experience of working through a team and working through departments and working through this experience of listening to these conversations, these collaborations and negotiations. So the actual process of a tech dev roadmap partnership is around negotiation as well. And producers can really add value there about forcing that negotiation. And a negotiation might conclude that we're not really sure of the answer. We better go and find out, or we better do some investigation. Let's put a few people together and investigate and find out more before we make a decision, right? So it's usually around team leads at this level, just because it's quite high level. It's happening at the beginning, or it's happening because there's a major new pillar being created for a game or something like that, and you don't want everybody to stop and get involved. So it tends to be team lead. And that could take the form of Miro boards, Jira portfolio, whatever, right? Excel, I don't know, whatever. In terms of artifacts, in terms of where you store this stuff, where you visualize it. But again, it's a visualization for communication purposes. And if you've got it, and you can match it against the vision, and you can match the roadmap against the milestones, roughly, then you've got something, right? You've got a conversation piece. By the way, be very careful around dates. Never assume a date's been set for a good reason. Most dates have been set by people because they're trying to force a sense of urgency. They want to go, well, we need a proof of concept by then, because otherwise we'll never get the game out. So let's just put a date down. Now you might say, well, hang on, I'll tell you what, we can do you half of it, we can do you a much smaller one, and then we can iterate towards what you want. But if we just start producing something for you by that date, which is smaller but more compact, is that going to be okay? And the person might say, sure, that's fine. I just want to make sure something's out by then. Or they might say, no, absolutely not. That's not okay, because we have a massive demo that we need to give to our publisher. And if we don't have those things in, they have said we must have them. And then you can go, oh God, help me, and try and work out how you're going to do it. But you need to question everything, right? Roadmaps are there for conversation, communication. Don't be afraid of asking the dumb questions, right? My whole career is asking dumb questions. Don't assume that people know what they're talking about either. Respect the experts, but remember that people can be talking about the same thing in different ways, because they're all slightly interpreting what's going on slightly differently. And you find that all the time when there's a massive level of complexity and a massive amount of work to do, is that people can just rush through conversations. So you might have to go back and you might have to get more detail again and again and again. So team plans. So from these roadmaps, and remember, this is your technical and development partnership roadmap, right? And by the way, tech and dev doesn't preclude anything else. I mean, I've put in art here, right? And all the others can go in there too. It's just that you tend to find that design tend to drive a lot of this stuff around the vision, interpretation of the vision and what that probably is going to look like. And engineering, smart as hell, go, well, okay, if that's what you think, we're going to have to do this, this and this, and by the way, that's probably not going to work, but this might. Art tends to sit there and go, well, all right, we've got stuff that we need to do, right? Art, style guide, Bible, etc., and to some degree, to some level of complexity. However, a lot of this depends upon you guys. Like, you sort your shit out, we'll service you, okay? So art tends to have a step back to a degree. Now, don't get me wrong, art's busy, right? But you can, in art, you can kind of, just like you can with, say, outsource management or whatever, right? You can step back and go, okay, you probably don't need VFX right now, right? You probably don't need us to do full level quality animation right now. You probably need us to step back and wait, because you're trying shit out. And until you finish trying it out, even at a roadmap level, we don't really know what you need from us. So we'll get on with our style guides, and we'll get on with our art Bible and the overall art plans and all that. We'll do our creative direction pieces, etc. But we'll rely on you guys to come and tell us when you're ready. We'll be part of this process so we understand and we can feed back. But when you're ready, come and find us. If you're shouting me right now, that's just what I've seen. Team plans emerge. So you need to actually turn this stuff, this high-level stuff, mid-level stuff, into an actual plan. And when I say a plan, I guess I mean a project plan, right? Now, of course, projects are finite. In this case, it tends to go on forever. But nevertheless, something like Jira, Handsoft, or whatever it is that you use, right? Your project tracking, it's where you finally go, well, actually, as a producer, I now know enough to start building some backlogs of work. Okay, I now know enough that I can sit with the teams and we can work out. Well, firstly, we can work out what teams we need, and we can start working through the specialist backlogs and the cross-departmental backlogs. So a specialist backlog might be a particular area of, say, engineering or design where they just need to do stuff. They need to be left alone to do stuff. But you've also got cross-departmental where you need to put people together to try things out, to develop features, etc. In which case you then automatically start creating dependencies. Because as soon as this happens, a dependency emerges, which is, well, which is it you want me working on, this or this? Okay? And again, the answer to that question can almost always be aided through the visualization of these roadmaps, because you can show someone a roadmap and say, well, look, we need this to happen or we can't do this, and you're responsible for that and this thing up here. What do you think? and have a conversation. And maybe the conversation will go to their lead. Maybe the conversation will be escalated beyond that. But the conversations can happen in a way that is educational. And I tell you what, people are really clever. And if you sit with them and talk to them, and they see this stuff, they go, oh, okay, yeah, great. Well, no one's ever shown me that before. I didn't know we were doing that for that reason. Okay, well, now I can make a decision. If I do this, and then this, and then this, I think that's going to get you what you need. Or they'll say, well, I'm not going to be able to give you what you need until you get me that person. And you know what it's like then? It's a negotiation between departments and between producers and between whatever, right? But at this point, when you're doing this, those plans, they have a source for their creation. They have an inspiration for their creation, which are the roadmaps. Without roadmaps, you've just got wild stab-in-the-dark planning, because you don't know the order of things and you don't know the implication, the dependencies. You know nothing, right? You don't know anything about milestones. You're just blind. Now, this whole process here I've put in here, this is the bit where you fail fast, you adapt. It's the time to be creative. It's feeds and is fed by the vision. So this is the other thing, like as the teams are working, it's where you discover things, where you design stuff, where you drop things, you try new stuff. That's feeding back into the vision, but the vision's also feeding all the way down to you, because that's where it all comes from, right? And this is where you use project management tools. Now, I don't think Jira is a project management tool, but Jira is very popular. Handsoft, blah, blah, whatever. Maybe if you're into art, you use ShotGrid and so on and so forth, right? But let's not forget, and this has been a really big deal for me in the last few years, right? Let's not forget, you got marketing and you got community. Now, particularly these days with the propensity for things like community building and building a huge fan base before a game goes live, and Kickstarter as it was, and now Steam greenlighting and things like that, and blah blah. I mean, there's so much, right? There's so much now where there's opportunities for you to get stuff out early and get feedback, and where marketing and community can really help you and really help the business. And if you look at the fact that we're talking about having milestones and business fed milestones, if you need to build a fan base of a particular size, and you're not releasing content and you're not releasing demos and you're not showing people anything, you're keeping it all secret, like in the good old days of game development where you'd keep something secret for 4 years and then hope that the audience was there, right? You can't do that these days, right? You've got to get something out. You've got to feed the beast, because that beast is your friend, it's your players. And therefore there needs to be a partnership between you, and I'm presuming you are not in marketing, maybe you are in or community, right? But the rest of you, right? You need to partner with marketing and community, because these departments, these teams are as passionate as you are, and they want you to succeed and they want the game to succeed. And you cannot simply ignore them and say, well, we're too busy to help you because we're developing. No, you're not. That's not true. What you're saying is you are too busy to think about how, during development, you can feed some of the development stories and development assets and development outputs out externally. And it could be externally to investors, right? It could be externally to publishers. It could be externally to an end bunch of players, or family and friends, right? To user testing. It could be anything. It doesn't matter. The fact is that marketing and community have strategies. And those strategies are, how are we going to make you successful? Because otherwise you're going to get to the end of your process, release a game, and no one knows it exists. And that's not good, is it? So what can you do? How can you feed each other? And it is tied to the product map. And you should expect that you lead the charge, but you're also influenced by these teams, right? And the level of that influence depends upon what they need and what they're going to be able to give you, and the kind of game that's going out and blah, blah, blah. But this is why mobile gaming is a lot different from PC console on the whole, in that mobile is far less frightened of shoving an incomplete game out there than most larger teams, right, on PC and console. Now, of course, again, if you look at Steam and the fact you can get a game that's unfinished in front of players and get feedback, and then you can be building as you go, you see that's a real Kickstarter model. You're basically saying, pay me some money, get an unfinished game, and you're going to fund me, therefore, to finish that game. And therefore, you're one of my fans, and you're going to be able to influence what I'm doing. That's community, right? And marketing. But not everything can respond to that kind of viral marketing. And also, it takes up a lot of time. So maybe you don't want to do it that way, but it doesn't matter. The fact is that those marketing plans and community strategies, they're just part of the business of making a game. And making game is a business. Unless you're very fortunate and there's like, I don't know. Unless you're very fortunate, I'm just going to leave it like that. Mostly, the games industry is about business, right? You know this, right? You can look at what happens when things go wrong and people lose their jobs. Look at what happens when studios just close down. There's a lot that can go wrong because it's involving money. Now, if you know this from the start as a producer and you go in saying, I'm not scared of money, and also I'm going to assist the people who make us money, right? I'm going to make sure that I listen to product managers talking about monetization strategies. I'm going to listen to marketing and community who are saying, let's partner up for the whole period of developing this game, put out developer diaries, right? Do videos. What they do is they look at the roadmap and they actually have the whole stream in the roadmap. They say, here's how we're going to contribute in that roadmap. But they can only contribute if the production and the other teams are championing them. And I'm a big champion of that, okay? Because you live or die on it in many cases. So just make sure that you don't have a kind of a bad attitude. These people are going to help you succeed, okay? And if it means that 1% of the time for the entire game development is spent on this stuff, who cares? Right? What does it matter? It's going to be beneficial. And again, this comes down to cost of delay, it comes down to prioritization, it comes down to value and cost, it comes down to, it's another department or departments, right? They need things too. So I've gone on about this for a while just because I've seen it go really wrong. But this view of coming from your vision and making roadmaps out of that, you can see, right, a lot of work, huge amounts of work. Where's the work? The work is in discussion. The work is in collaboration. And what does that produce? It produces information. The information that comes from saying, what, you want me to do that and not that? And are you sure the game's about this and not that? And what exactly do you mean about this combat system? How's that going to work? This is where the conversations produce the information gets documented or lost, and that then gets turned into a rough order of, well, okay, in that case, we're going to need to do these things, and we're going to need to try this stuff out. And it can roughly be split, right, from a development perspective, it can roughly be split into, we're going to try this stuff out at a design phase or a creative stage, right, and we're going to just iterate and try things and fail, versus, and in the background, we're going to be working on a whole bunch of systems and a whole bunch of frameworks and whatever. And that's where you find the engineering teams disappearing and just working on things that they know you're going to need. And they can do that. They can front load that while you're waiting for the detail to emerge. And that detail emerges when the design team, maybe cross-discipline teams, have had the chance to really explore things and try them out. So, I mean, it's a natural place for a pause, right? It's 45 minutes in, and I do think this is probably a great time to get a cup of tea. Because the next thing we're going to look at is this. The helicopter view. So, yeah, feel free to take a break and come back, or we'll just launch straight in there. Now, one of the things that you can do is you can say, well, what do we need to do to make any kind of game that's like this, and you might have a vision in which you can guess. But I did this when I first started at a new team that had a new game, and I started with the high level game team planning and just broke it down and went, look, whatever the game is, you're going to need some marketing analysis. You're going to need to know who your target audience is, competitive analysis, your platform decisions, your marketing pitch. And at a high level concept, you're going to need the vision, summary overview, game pillars, key features, innovations, USPs, unique selling points. And went down like that, right? Just putting some general stuff in here. And there's nothing really new going on here. It's just a standard list. So gameplay, maybe like, what are the first minutes? What's the game flow? What's the victory game goals? Number of players, modes. Art, how's it going to look? Has concepting begun? How is that? Art style discussed, art pipelines discussed, right? And then proving out the pipelines as you go, proving out core gameplay as you go. And there were these rough blocks at the top. And bear in mind, this was very much for conversation. Tech, physics game requirements, platforms to deliver on, what are the engines that we're going to use, setting up the team infrastructure. And then production. What's the project planning system? What about the core team recruitment plan? What about best practices for remote studio? What about preparing for scoping, right? And so on and so forth. So, and even down to like risks and stuff like that. And this was a game which had a blockchain element, don't hate me. So there were elements there around NFT drops, investments, etc., right? But I put some thoughts down which were made much more intelligent by actual people who are experts. So things like the design team, we split it into various systems like combat system and PvP, PvE, UI UX, narrative economics. And we made all these breakdowns around, well, we're going to need to work out weapon mechanics, ability mechanics, base character mechanics, things like here, character progression, player progression, enemy AI. Again, all of this is the sort of thing that you're going to do if you're making what was here a third-person shooter battle royale game. Okay, so if you're going to do that kind of stuff, here's the sort of things you're going to need to be able to work on. So, and that fed into the team composition. It fed into, well, okay, these are the kind of teams we're going to need then, and these are the kind of people we're going to need to hire here, and the kind of money we're going to need to spend on making this thing happen, right? And then we did some of the art stuff around animation, and and some of this isn't even filled in, and a lot of it changed, but it didn't matter. What mattered was we realized, hey, look, we need to have an initial art style, we need an art bible, we need character and weapon prototyping, right? Whatever in art. Some of it in engineering, right? So things like what we're going to do about the animation and movement system. We were using Unreal Engine 5, so are we going to use theirs? Are we going to use our own? What about world narrative? How are we going to do world partitioning? What about the narrative system? Because there isn't a native one. What are we going to do about that? Unreal networking, what are we going to do? And so on and so forth, right? And then we had these blocks of time, really. Well, I say time. They were not time, they were phases. But it was like, moving forward, what are we probably going to have to focus on first? And the reason for doing that was because of experienced leads saying, well, you're just going to have to do this, then that. But also, what does that give you? It gives you a recruitment plan, doesn't it? It says, well, if we're going to have to focus on like matchmaking, we're going to have people who know what matchmaking is and how it works on the team. And bear in mind, this was a small team that we were building up quickly. We were scaling fast. So it became very useful for that. Okay, at a departmental level, and that was the original conversations. So what I did was I had those conversations. I was the only producer with the leads. We put this sort of list together, and people liked it because they were like, oh, okay, yeah, great. That's good. Now we really know what our overall organizational chart should look like of all our teams. Like, eventually, what is the team going to look like? How big is it going to need to be? Where are we going to be able to outsource and where are we not, and blah, blah, blah. And it was, just quite standard. There's nothing particularly clever going on there. And then there was also work done on, there was also work done on cross-departmental. So, and this was really great. So, for example, art direction, right? So where's the approved key art pipelines, etc. We'd kind of covered above, but also things like all the heroes, the characters, basic movement, melee paradigms, cosmetics, right? Stuff like that. The weapons. So how are we going to balance it? VFX anims, cosmetics again, all the way down to outsourcing. How's that going to look? What are we going to do? What sort of decisions do we need to make there in story development, right? How are we going to have that sorted out? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Live service. So what it became was a very useful exploration into the scope of the game, okay, as well as some of the details. Now, that helicopter view was eventually turned into the plan of attack at a development engineering roadmap sort of partnership level, and I'm going to show you that. Okay, now that roadmap, you can see elements of this where nearly all of the cards here were taken and added into a much more sort of lozenge based, dependency based roadmap. But this was just the basics. And because I did the basics with the team, and because we could then talk about it and we could show people, then we got ourselves a nice org chart. We got ourselves a recruitment plan. We knew who we would need to recruit first and last, where the optional hires were, and we also knew where we were making progress and where we weren't, and where the big gaps were already emerging, and what we would need to do about that. So it was a plan right there. Just having the conversations, because the team was so small at that point, just having those conversations meant that a bunch of us knew what our priorities were, and we just got on with it. Okay, so you can look at that the same way with your game, and maybe you're at the same stage where you're going, well, let's just throw something together. Let's just do something, right? And you can see with me, it was so rough, just really rough stuff around, like the development process, right? It was just really rough. I just went, oh yeah, design, prototyping, development, content creation, polish, bug fixing, live game. I mean, it was nonsense, right? It didn't matter. The fact is that it simply gave a like a now, next, then view of how to do a thing. In this case, make this game. And where was it all based upon? It wasn't all based on the vision. It was a lot of it was based upon clever people going, here's how we make a game. And because this game needs these things, we're going to have to think about this stuff, right? So it was the clever people on the team, the leads, and their team members having those discussions, particularly the leads, with me, with whoever. And then us bulking this out, making notes and blah, 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 right? But actually what happened from this was that we started work on a proof of concept checklist of what is a proof of concept, what is it we need to deliver and why, what's the business requirements, what's the milestones, like what is a proof of concept, do we even need one, what's it going to show us, are we going to need to show it, who's it going to be shown to, blah blah blah, right? So, and it became like a living breathing demo of the game that we iterate upon. So we knew from looking at this that there were elements of this that we could prioritize, elements that we could do or not do, etc, etc. Okay, so it was really useful, and we referred back to it again and again and again. Now the original Miro board that this is on became an enormous beast because it had loads of extra stuff hanging off of it, because this inspired people to just be deep diving and having more conversations. So you know, you can use something like this at the beginning to just visualize the complexity and the scale and scope of your game, and just to note bits where you've already started and to note bits which you're going to have to think through more. But it is certainly a very rough draft, right? And I'll show you what became of the rough draft later. All right. Now, yeah, I grabbed some stuff. Just, you're aware of this, I hope, right? But, you know, in the traditional world, you have these phases. So planning, what are we building? Who's the audience? Pre-production, okay? So pre-production is like the vertical slice text stuff, let's say, the early prototyping, right? Production, okay? So production is the conveyor belt. Let's get on with it. Produce a billion things, off you go. Launching, testing, went down the wrong way. I thought, hey, that's a bit weird. We've gone straight to launch. Testing. So, okay, how's it looking? How's the game going? What's the user acceptance testing looking like? What about all the bugs? Blah, blah. Does it work? Is the game fun? Pre-launch, right? Let's do a rolling release maybe. Let's look at hyping it up. Let's look at this. Let's look at that. Launching. Let's squash those bugs. Let's polish. Post-production. Let's get on with it. Let's patch. Now, this is a really traditional method of looking at game planning to launch, right? Based upon the way things used to be. I would argue a lot of this now is skewed because, while it's still true, a lot of this stuff, right? If you look at it, especially with things like agile testing, you really want to embed testing at the beginning. You don't want to leave testing until, you don't want to leave like the majority of testing until the end or near the end. You want a rolling partnership with QA and with user acceptance testing and user feedback, friends and family, whatever, right? That stuff needs to happen a lot earlier because there's a lot more risk these days, right? There's a lot more competition you're up against, and you need to be pretty sure that what you're doing makes sense earlier. And there's a lot of optimization to be made through agile testing methodologies. Then there's things like the pre-launch and launch. Well, these days, it's rare that a game's going to launch and then go into post-production. It's much more likely you're going to have a rolling launch, a soft launch, and that's going to mean that a proportion of the team's time, a large proportion of the team's time, is going to be focused on responding to feedback and getting the game into a stage where you can have a long tail, meaning you've got a lot of extra content coming out, possibly where you've got, maybe it's DLC, maybe it's just free content, maybe it's the kind of game where you can sell costumes and whatever it is, right? But it's more about game patching, right? It's more about getting a gold label out. It's more like rolling into live, building up, right, a bigger and bigger audience and rolling into live and being able to scale and being able to support that scaling. So the days of launching a game and walking off are pretty much gone in a lot of cases, right? I mean, okay, there's still self-contained indie games out there like Stories, etc. Like, I don't know, something like, say, To the Moon, right? Where it's like a compact story and it goes out and there you go, you're done, let's make another one. But even there's support to be done on it. But I guess the point here is that the roadmap needs to reflect what is true, not of this kind of cycle, but of your game and what you need. So you don't have to follow these sort of traditional ways of doing things, right? I got a bit of text there splashed in from, where is it? Perforce, right? About here's what the different stages are. But even then, like, yeah, you can have stages like this. This is a roadmap, right? It's a roadmap. It's a roadmap at a certain level, but it's a high level roadmap that says concept, rolling into pre-production, rolling into production, rolling into post-production. Hey, look, there's where the testing starts and finishes. Here's where the asset creation tends to happen. Here's where these things tend to happen, which is roughly true. Okay, these things need to appear in your roadmap, but do they need to appear in every roadmap at every level of detail? No, of course not. Things like advanced lighting and texture passes, you need to be aware of that as a producer, right? You need to be aware that stuff mostly happens as close to launch as possible, and that your lighting team are going to lose their minds. But you need to be aware of that, right? But it doesn't need to appear in every roadmap. It simply needs to be something that you know about when you do things like capacity planning and when you do things like resource management and where you do things like build into the overall cost and time that something's going to take. Does it need to be in every roadmap? No. Is it something you need to be aware of? Yes. So I'm just showing you this because you need to get into your head that just because I'm showing you something, you don't need to do it like that. It's what matters to you in your game, okay? And I firmly believe that, yeah, you can batch games and do similar things, but each game is, by necessity, unique, right? And again, this is about those game creations. This isn't about your job to produce another 10 levels for a game that's already live, right? That you don't need to do this sort of thing then. You can do a much more compressed roadmap and a plan. This is about the complexities of creative teams coming together and trying to produce something that's fun and trying to get it out there and trying to build an audience and so on and so forth, right? That's where all that complexity builds from. This is a roadmap. It's a roadmap that is pretty useless to a lot of people, but let's go through it. So if we look at a rough sort of smaller team with more emphasis on investment and more on business side of things, you get like where we are now, right? You get, okay, let's create a roadmap, a now, next, later maybe roadmap that simply says, here's what we need to do now, next, and later on. And this is that product and technical road mapping partnership which produces like your development, engineering, art, etc. roadmap, and we'll look at that next. And over time, you need a focused vision, all right? So you've produced a vision, but you need to focus down on which bit of that vision you need to deliver first, okay? Because a vision's got everything. So what is it you actually need from that vision first? Now, you could argue that's your proof of concept, that's your demo. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that you do the work. You sit the person who's holding that vision down and say, yeah, okay, but let's do some, say, user story mapping on this. Let's break it down into, it's all of these things, but which are the bits you can't do without? And which are the bits that need to be proven out first? That is your focused vision. And get them to write a new focused vision. Get them to say, all right, here's the whole game vision, but here's the focus bit now that we want to do first, right? And maybe it's in phases. Maybe you can do a couple of these. But that focused vision has the impact of helping you to work on a focused plan. And that's really useful, because otherwise you're going to do what I'm about to show you, which is the plan for the entire game all at once. And that's great, except it will scare the hell out of people and it can defocus you. So while you need to do that thing, because otherwise you don't know what the scope is and you don't know when to hire people and what systems you're going to need and all this and all that, that backlog that you need to build. The focused plan can help you go, yeah, anyway, for the majority of people on the ground, this is what they need to know, that we're focusing on this bit of that, and that this piece that we're focusing on, which will expand, right, over time, this is the piece of the plan which will produce the thing that can be seen. And that's a win for everybody, okay? And it also proves out some of the things that we're not sure about. So this could produce, say, a demo, right? Proof of concept to a demo, fan-based demo, whatever, investment demo. And mostly during this period, the team are involved in brainstorming around features and vision. So it's your foundational work and your visually striking work. Yeah. So, and I'm just giving this as an example, by the way, of how this can develop and how roadmaps and planning are so useful and tied together. But foundational work and visually striking work. So what is it you need to do that's actual foundation that just has to be done? And who's then free, and how do you prioritize those who aren't free to produce that more visually striking work that's going to appear in a demo and get people really excited? And then regular releases planned and scoped. So how are you going to iterate upon that? What are those releases going to look like and why? And that depends a lot on what you're trying to do, who you're doing it with, what your milestones are, what you've got nailed down that you have to release against, and what are optional. It could be that you've got total freedom and you can just get something out whenever you feel like it, but it's more likely that there's going to be regular releases that you need to think about. So fail fast, explore and iterate is part of this phase, right? So it could be that there's a small design and other cross-departmental teams who are working on features and trying things and trying out whole pillars and just working through and saying, do you think this is going to work? And not just the individual pieces, but bringing it together, okay? And often you'll find things like vertical slices there, bringing elements together to say, is this working really? Explore, iterate, so just have a go, right? Find the fun, etc. That's a time period which is very difficult to nail down if you're a producer. It can be quite frustrating, but if you don't have the time to find the fun, then there won't be any. And then we will have tested and rejected many ideas and even features to reach the best game, right? So that's fine. That's part of it. So commence winning game fans, giving confidence to investors might be a thing you need to do. And then showing regular progress. You've got marketing joining in here. And then regular vertical slices planned to prove out tech and features. So this can be a way of getting your game together, right? And the reason I'm showing this is to say to you that you can have multiple roadmaps and multiple plans, but there is a reason for each of those, okay? You can focus down on your vision to say, yeah, okay, but what's the most important thing? Okay, I'm going to build a plan around that. And then you can say, well, okay, looking back at the vision and looking back at what we need to do to make the game, what do we need to add now? Which modules, which elements do we need to add to that? So it's very powerful, and it's all about roadmap planning, right? And it's all about the conversation, but it's also about your deliverables and your business and what you need to deploy when, and when you're going to bring it all together, and who you need to show it to, and what responses you're going to get, and when you need those responses, and how you're going to respond. Right, there's a lot here, and it's like a whole story of accountability and a whole story of delivering value that changes, because you might say, okay, we're now showing a demo of our game to people, and they hate it, right? They absolutely hate it. What are we going to do? Now that could mean revisiting the vision. It could mean dumping an entire pillar, right? Who knows? But whatever it means, you can see that because you've got your roadmaps and because you've got your vision and because you've got your plans, you can adapt those. You're ready, right? You still know that there's 50% of these backlogs which are about you just need to do them, right? And it's not going to impact on that, but you've got this adaptable bunch of teams and cross development teams which can respond to that kind of change. But it's why you need to have confidence in the overall plan and the overall roadmaps, because then it's not going to shake your foundations, right? If you get some feedback and something needs to change, you're just like, that's okay. We're still doing all this stuff up here, and we're still doing this, and we still know why we're doing that. But if you don't have any of that, any of these kind of things can really shake you to the core and totally disrupt your teams. And you really don't want to disrupt your teams. As little as possible noise, right? That's your job. Reduce the noise. Just get that noise out of the way and help people to focus down on the work they need to do. So I think that's enough for this section. And in the next section, I want to show you an example of how we took that roadmap that I showed you there and turned it into something terrifying. Okay, so in this section, I want to show you the terrifying roadmap. Now, just like very briefly, so we took this product roadmap, right? There's different streams of activity and different streams that we needed to address and be aware of. And we dropped off of those milestones. And we went, oh, okay, so it seems like there's a bunch of stuff that we need to do. And there's a rough order of delivering things. So, for example, we need to deliver an art Bible guide pretty early on, but we also need to have a 3x3 multiplayer internal build ready, right, at a certain point. All of which was fine because it meant we could get our hands on it. We could go, oh, okay, so if we need to have this before this or that after that, it makes more sense now, right? It's like a build stabilized and playable for regular reviews, internal design workflows approved, right? There was a bunch of stuff here which was studio goals, game releases, product goals, which we could put our hands on and go, great, got it, okay, yeah, got it. If you don't have that, it's much more difficult for you to order some of the work, okay? Now, this was a big project and it took a long time to put these things down. However, it wasn't that long. It wasn't that hard. It was more about just getting people in a room and just forcing them to talk, right? And documenting it and doing a bunch of prep work. And most of that prep work came from the design and the engineering leads. They were amazing, okay? But a lot of this stuff was also taken from the original work that was here that we did, okay? So a lot of this stuff was actually devolved into this. And you can't see it really right now, but it was. Now, if we zoom out, you can start seeing the terrifying world that resulted from the conversations. So all these lines are dependencies, or flows, right? So here, for example, art pipeline outsourcing. It's concept, production, pipeline, mechs production, cats production, character creation, cats accessories, vehicle, right? A natural flow. However, that flow had some problems, okay? Because we knew that we needed, say, a nanite pipeline that was experimental to be used. And so we started to have these conversations and drop in notes, which is brilliant. If we look at here, pipelines, workflows and tools, which was huge because we were a new studio, so we had to set these things up, right? They weren't just there. I mean, you're probably in a studio in which this stuff's already set up. Maybe you're not. But we needed to list all these things. We needed to say, right, well, we're going to need blah, 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 right? ADO to Jira streamlining, CI and build basic setup, CI and build deployment release notes, blah, 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 right? And every time we had a conversation, we dropped notes in. And the producers were there to listen to this and to follow up afterwards and go, okay, got it. This is what we need to do then. And the rough columns here, the colouring of these columns was now, next, later. And this one at the end was an icebox in which we could freeze stuff if we needed to. Okay. So the stuff to the left, the further to the left, obviously the further to the left, the more you pay attention to what you can see and the more detail you plunge into, okay? Because you need the detail on this stuff on the left-hand side before you need the detail on going forward, on the whole, depending. But if we jump in a little bit more, foundational game networking, right? So we need base networking, we need multiplayer support that builds up. We need base networking as a second phase, animation replication foundation, game mode management, server lifecycle, right? This stuff was hard. It was hard for me to understand anyway. Some people found it quite easy. Then there was the online stuff, right? A lobby to matchmaking, login and authentication, and how that would flow into user targeting, and how that flowed back to user game configuration system, and how that flowed from a performance evaluation budget, and blah, 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 right? And how this stuff would just all link together. Now, if you look at this, you can go, holy mother, what on earth? But it was incredibly valuable and useful because these lines appeared from the preparation that was done by leads and directors talking to each other and the teams meeting and us presenting this to them and them asking a load of questions, right? The experts, the specialists coming in and saying, well, hang on, are you aware that, right? Is this part of a universal item attachment system? We need more clarity on this, right? And stuff like that, right? Weapon and veteran management, loading, meta systems. All this stuff led to a lot of conversation. But we never forgot up here that whatever we were saying had needed to be done down here, there was a rough order of deployment, of delivery, of business and marketing, let's say, and things like that, expectations, right? And also stabilization expectations. Like, we needed there to be a point where we could look at the in-game performance sanity check, right? We needed to do that. We needed to look at that. And that we couldn't really go on until we had an idea that the in-game performance was going to be okay. So things like that, right? Checklists and stuff that you could build into a bigger title. Like you could call that, you could say, well, that will be built into Vertical Slice 2 or whatever. You could, But it's those kind of milestones which were really important to us that we could order this stuff around. And that's what we did, right? It didn't look like this at the beginning. We moved a bunch of stuff depending upon conversation. But because we had producers by then who were sat over certain areas, and we had really smart directors and leads sat across these areas, they would know then what their teams needed to do. And it also led us to know what the cross-dependent teams would need to be achieving, okay? And where the dependencies are on them discovering things and failing fast, like how long they've got there and the impact of those things on some of the other systems. But you can see, right, that there were certain areas here, and particularly if I go up and look at the sort of purples of engineering, there's a whole bunch of stuff here that just needed to be done no matter what, okay? Like QA, I mean, the workflow, the internal game builds, the playthrough automation, that just needed to be done. and where some stuff, particularly in the design areas, which was this darker colour here, some stuff that just needed to have, you just had to have a go. And until you had a go, it was going to be difficult to find out, like, you know, what the end result was going to look like. But lots and lots and lots of systems that needed to be built out. So this came together from this. Who knew, right? So this stuff here was that useful. And this became, I mean, I call it a business-fed product roadmap. I shouldn't really call it a product roadmap, because actually it's a development roadmap. It's a partnership between the disciplines, fed from the vision and fed from this business sort of drop-ins of milestones. But I think that's really important for you to think about, is that this came from multiple inputs, and each input was very valid, and each input gave us a reason to say, here's why we need to do things in a certain order, and here's where we have dependencies in the flow of work, and the flow of discovery, right? And we need to do X before Y because it feeds into Y, and it produces information for Z, A, B, C, etc. So once we had done this, the producers sat with the leads and they turned it into the plan, right? Into the actual plan of attack for the teams, and it helped to feed the creation of the teams. So we're back here, right? Team plans. We then knew, well, what kind of teams do we need, right? Are we going to have strike teams? Are we going to have feature teams? Like, what are we going to have? And that's going to be a separate thing, because somebody asked about, you know, looking at cross departmental teams and setting them up. So I'll do that separately. But you can see, right, that if we hadn't have done that piece of work, yes, we could intuitively, because we were quite a veteran bunch of people, we could intuitively throw together our best ideas for the kind of teams we were going to need. But we wouldn't have known enough about specialist backlogs. We'd have been going pretty blind, right, if we hadn't have done that work. Because the specialist backlogs are these kind of things here, right? The online team, what you're going to need to do, right? Cross-functional core tech, foundational game networking, foundational game systems. These things don't just appear because we hope for the best. These things appear because we put a hell of a lot of work into communicating conversations, into breaking those conversations down, into visualizing them, into putting the notes in, into going and following through afterwards on what needs to be known, what needs to be investigated, what is already known, what information we're going to need that isn't there now, where we're going to have to employ partners, right, for co-dev partnerships, where we can now look at doing things like, okay, we've got a rough idea now about outsourcing as well, right? Because the art team's in there too, and we did a lot of breakdown there where they go, oh, okay, well, because you're using, say, Nanite in Unreal Engine 5, we now know we're going to need X, Y, Z, right? And not a great example, but when they could say, oh, look, that's when the demo milestone's coming up, we're going to need to be producing higher quality artwork by then, and how that fed back. All of those conversations fed into each other, and everyone was a witness to it. It was a whole team event, okay? And it was incredibly valuable because we all understood the game we were making much better, okay? Now, again, if you look at this, you go, oh my God! But the next thing that happened was, going back to this, right, the next thing that happened, it was this, the focused, right, okay? We've done the big bit. Now, where are we going to put our initial focus? And that focus, of course, did not do away with those specialist backlogs that had been developed by the different departmental teams. What it did was it focused down the team on, okay, what's the first things that we need to really plan out and test out, right? That's going to make it clear that this vision of this game is going to work. So really useful, really valuable. I can't recommend this enough. No, it doesn't have to be in this format, right? You do whatever you like. But this format is was useful for us because we could quickly visualize like the baseline of what we needed to do, and then we could just drag stuff around and go, right, we better do this then this, and dump notes in there, keep updating it, and then take the whole thing and move it into actual team-based, task-based plans. Okay, so from what you could say was an initiative or even epic level, we could translate these things down into like user stories, etc. Okay, whatever we chose to do, depending upon the methodology. So incredibly useful. And the other thing here, where we dropped in, say, big exclamation marks, some of that was because we were like, well, we need to hire people, right? And we've got a certain, this stuff's front loaded, but we don't have anybody to do it. Or we could like move to the right and say, at a point over here, we're going to be in real trouble if we haven't done these other things. So gave you your risks as well, risks and issues, right? And influence is everything. And that's what keeps producers busy, isn't it? It's like you can actually get in there and go, right, well, there's a big list here of stuff that needs to be addressed. And if I don't address this and keep those conversations going, the other people are just too busy, right? They're too busy doing the right things. I need to do some work here with them to make sure that we're ready for this stuff. So incredible amount of value you can add to all of this. An amazing amount. Okay. So I just want to say thank you, really. It's been quite a long presentation, if I want to call it that. And we've covered quite a few different things. And I guess the takeout for me is always going to be the same thing, which is there are hard skills that you need as a producer. And a lot of them for me are around not just like project management, but are more on the sort of the level above, right? The program management, of being able to look at multiple projects coming together or multiple teams working together, how to prioritize, how to value that work, how to order that work, and how to step up and up and up and up and say, okay, what's our roadmap? What's the vision? What are the business objectives? How do we tie all that together? And I hope I've shown you some ways of doing that. There are multiple ways, right? I hope I've shown you some ways of being able to say, I get why there's a milestone there. Even if I don't agree with it, I get it. Or there's a milestone there and I'm going to find out why. And I'm going to see if we can do something about that. Or here's how we order things so that we know what we should be doing next and what we shouldn't. And where there are dependencies on doing things in a certain way, what does that mean for the team? What does that mean for people who are going on holiday? What does that mean for the plans that we're currently working on? It seems like we're doing things in the wrong order. Oh my God, we better change things. And what does it mean for the vision that this whole area here doesn't seem to be coming together and we're going to have to change it, right? What does that mean for a lot of the people who are working in the background on their specialism backlogs? So it all comes together and gives you so much information and empowers you, but empowers the whole team. Okay, I guarantee you the teams love seeing these roadmaps because they go, right, I get it. I have confidence in you. I have confidence in the team. I have confidence in like the higher team as well. That I say the higher team, in the team that is, you know, in charge of the plans, right? I have faith there because I can see it now. And it also gives people the chance to say, why that then? That's not right. Oh, okay, it is right. Or no, really, that scares me. It gives people the chance to have those conversations because they don't normally get involved. They don't normally get shown. They normally get told what to do, right? This empowers people. This is part of the Agile manifesto, right? To empower people and get them involved in these sort of things. Of course, you don't always want to get people involved in these things because it can disrupt and it can scare and it can throw people off. But, you know, that's part of the job as well, right? Is to understand when and where. So let's see if this is useful to you. I'm probably going to do a deep dive on the kind of the template for really high level business product roadmaps, but I don't really want to do that now because it's just too much. But let me know if you've got any questions, and I hope this was useful. If you want any of this sort of to download, I can give you kind of some vanilla versions, but I'm not going to give you the totally detailed versions. But yeah, I can give you some vanilla versions, okay? So just ask. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.